After making thumbnails for nearly 5 years, I wanted to know if I've even gotten better over this time period. So I gave myself 3 old thumbnails from the last 5 years that I will be trying to remake, but better, to see if I really have improved. Starting with the first one. The first thumbnail I'm going to recreate is from a video titled, I Found a Real Gorilla Tag Ghost. This video is from 2024, and throughout this video, the thumbnails will get older. I chose this thumbnail because I thought that it had a lot of potential to look eerie and menacing looking, but I didn't quite pull it off in 2024 because I was not very good at making thumbnails. So to start off this thumbnail, I recreated the original positioning as the one from 2024, but with better composition and posing. If you don't know what I mean by composition, I'm basically talking about positioning of all the elements in the thumbnail, like me and the ghost, the camera angle, and everything like that. I didn't really understand basic composition knowledge in 2024, but after a couple years of experience in a graphic arts class in school, I learned a lot more than I knew then, and definitely not just composition. Right off the bat, I'm looking at what's currently rendered in Photoshop and thinking to myself what needs to be done entirely with this thumbnail. I think start with shadows, then do other lighting on the ghost, polish everything up, and then go from there. Normally, I know in my head exactly how a thumbnail is going to look before I even begin with the renders. Of course, there are exceptions to this, but I generally have a look I'm going for in every thumbnail, so I'm not lost midway through. Remember, this is what the original thumbnail looks like, and personally, I already think it looks better, but I can tell you I'm very happy with the end result on this thumbnail and also the other two. This is where we move into camera raw. Camera raw is where I take the thumbnail from looking polished but bland into a nice, contrasty, and colorful thumbnail with the atmosphere I'm going for. If you look at the thumbnail before camera raw, you may think it looks fine, but when you compare the two next to each other, you end up thinking the non-camera raw version is drastically worse. And that's why I love camera raw in every thumbnail. After adding a subtle glitch effect and some extra highlights, our first thumbnail remake is done. Now that we are done with everything in Blender, the second thumbnail I'm going to recreate is one of my first viral videos out there, titled I Became the #1 Gorilla Tag Player. I had remade this thumbnail before, but honestly, it didn't look very good and it felt rushed. I wanted to keep the style and mood of the original video's thumbnail since I think it's one of my most iconic thumbnails I've made. It just feels so well harmonized. On top of that, I think it's one of the thumbnails I made the most mistakes in. It looks choppy, the shadows are horrid, there's weird lighting everywhere that doesn't make sense, and a lot more that were just getting annoying to look at. And that's why I remade it in the first place. I still love this thumbnail though, and I think in the future I will remake it again with that same in-game style to fully capture what I was thinking of in 2023. Let me know in the comments if you want to see a video where I bring back that in-game thumbnail style for a couple thumbnails I've made recently. You are probably wondering what this weird curve thing I'm adding here is, and you'll see what it ends up making in a second. I did want to mix up a few things in this thumbnail that I thought might make it easier to read and tell what the video is about. I sprinkled in a couple references from the old thumbnail, like the trophy description on the bottom, and as you can see, the curves and a couple other modifications made the hat golden. I didn't add that random golden gorilla in my hand from the old thumbnail because I thought the positioning I had looked cooler, so I thought it would be better to use a #1 badge and a golden beanie to make myself look more rich in a way. By the way, at the end, I'm going to take all 3 of these thumbnails to see which one improved the most, and if these thumbnails prove I'm really better than I was 5 years ago. Here, I'm just adding some final touches to the thumbnail, like little highlights, and then we are almost done. This is where we are reaching the final stages of the thumbnail. I needed to make the beanie look more shiny, so I added this lens flare effect on it. And then we go through the final steps of camera raw. Not changing up too much though, since I like how it looks without it and don't want to make this thumbnail look oversaturated. After camera raw and a final touch up, our second thumbnail remake is complete. Okay, I'm very happy with the result of that second thumbnail, and I think everything that was wrong with the original thumbnail was fixed. For the third and final thumbnail, I'm going to be remaking one from all the way back in 2022. This thumbnail was from a video titled Escaping Gorilla Tag. I think this thumbnail was way ahead of its time, unless you compare it to someone like J-Man, since he was making some really good looking thumbnails in that time period. Either way, looking at it today, I see a lot of flaws in this thumbnail. It's very hard to look at and understand what's happening. The mountain's edge, if you could even tell that's what it was, blends into the background a a lot, and something like tutorial would be a lot better of a representation to escaping the map. And that's exactly what I did this time around. I did like everything else in this thumbnail, like my old style of putting galaxies as the skies. I don't know why I did this, but I would always do it, and honestly, it was pretty cool. I also like the text on the left as well as the highlights on the hand, but obviously those could be improved a lot because all that was in the old thumbnail was a bevel and emboss, so the lighting wasn't really dynamic and it also looked way too soft. After I had put everything into Photoshop, I started off by looking for a galaxy background that would fit my old style. I found a background that I had used before and was specifically looking for, since I wanted to have blue highlights. I then added bits of glow with a linear dodge add filter to make the sky glow a little more. I wanted that to make the overall atmosphere look cooler, and it makes the background blend better too, at least with the other highlights on the gorilla type walls. Honestly, while I was looking at the thumbnail at this point, I wasn't sure if it was going to end up looking better than the older version. Even though it didn't look good here, I kept going with the thumbnail in hopes of it turning out better with the later changes. I continued to experiment with glows and layer filterings on the walls and eventually got it down. I then made a small vignette and began to add shadows, hoping that would fix what I thought was wrong with the thumbnail. The main problem I saw was that the lighting was not where I wanted it to be. I was looking for this really awesome looking, high brightness, glowy area where my hand is reaching out and the highlights were very prominent, showing that, but also had darker edges to make that bright area pop and attract attention. That's what was failing, and you can definitely see it from the renders and how the map looks and how the hand looks. But with enough fiddling of shadows and vignette, I began to see something in this thumbnail. As soon as I made the highlights, the thumbnail was looking drastically better. I was beginning to have some hope. Although, we are definitely not done. This thumbnail is still lacking heavily in certain areas, and I had aimed to fix that as soon as possible. I continued with the highlights on my hand, but something felt off. I wasn't exactly sure what it was just yet, so I let it be. I had another glaring problem that just didn't feel right. I thought that my hand didn't really pop in the thumbnail or stand out at all, and that it needed to be fixed. I can't have the main focus of the thumbnail not immediately stand out to the viewer. I began to experiment with different things like drop shadows underneath the hand, but it just didn't look right. So now I began to experiment more. I started out by adding some vibrance to the grass and making it a little more green, while also brightening the galaxy in the back, and that seemed to help by making a bigger color contrast. I also added an even bigger glow bouncing off of the walls to drive more focus in on the sky and hand. I was slowly getting more confident with how the thumbnail looked. I thought it would be a good time to add in the escape text from the old thumbnail and mess around with those settings. I knew I wanted the font to be VCR OSD Mono, which is a font I had in an older version of the thumbnail, but didn't end up using it as the final. I really like this font, and it somehow portrays the mood and feeling I'm going for in this thumbnail. I don't know how to explain it. In the meantime, I had finally found a solution to making the hands stand out from everything else. I needed a much thicker and prominent highlight on more of the edges of the hands, which I made possible with an inner shadow. I know inner shadow doesn't sound like it would work for a highlight, but it does. This had also seemed to fix that weird feeling I had about the thumbnail, since I felt like it just made everything look better overall. I also tried out the same glitch effect from the ghost thumbnail, and it actually looked pretty nice in the sky. I wanted to capture that feeling of escaping, like a tough escaping the Matrix, so yeah, that's what I did. Finally, we move into camera raw. I was messing around with a little bit of distortion to also make it look more cinematic. Either way, our final thumbnail remake is done. But that leaves us with the question, which remake is the best? Let's start by comparing the first thumbnail. The first major improvement I see in these two is the positioning of me and the wall on the left side. I like how I angled it a little bit here. I don't really like the posing on this guy. I don't like how the wall is. I do think that it was all improved on the right side here. I also like how the ghost is reaching out instead of just standing here. I like the glitch effects a lot more than this weird, like, haziness. I don't know. I think it just looks weird entirely on the left side. The lighting is a lot more accurate. I'd say the final improvement is definitely camera raw. I think I got the mood down here. It's a little bit of self-glaze, but feels a little desaturated, and that's kind of what I was going for. I wanted it to bring out that mood, if that makes any sense. Don't know if it does, but next thumbnail, there wasn't too much wrong with this thumbnail in terms of how everything was positioned and that kind of stuff. It was mostly just that everything looks bad visually. I definitely didn't do this weird orange lighting. This is disgusting. I will never ever do this again. I still think this is a very good thumbnail. I think this holding hands up in the air is a very victory pose, if that makes sense. And for the final thumbnail, I see huge improvement. I was not seeing it at first. I was not seeing the thumbnail. I wasn't feeling it, didn't like it at all. But this one, I'm very happy with the results of all of this. I think the text is placed in better position. I think my hand is a better pose. Have I improved at thumbnail designing over the course of these 5 years? Well, you guys are gonna have to let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for watching.